Hi everyone, and welcome back again. Let's finish off this face. So, when we first started doing this, I'm going to actually change the skin color back so maybe you guys can see a little bit more clear. The bright color might be throwing you off slightly. Um, so I'm actually going to make it pretty dark. So if I go here, basically when we created this model, and remember when I just said everyone's going to panic because I know we need more detail here, and I said even at the start of our doing our model that we'd probably need more detail here. That's exactly why we left these with little detail, because we're actually going to cut in that detail. So we're getting, this is what's called the later stage of the model. We got our simple parts of our model done. Now we're adding the complex parts of our model. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to polygon cut mode, and we're actually going to cut in more detail. We're cutting in new loops ourselves. So I'm going to cut in a new loop here. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cut a couple loops here. So I right click to get off edge cut mode of the last cut I just did. And I go to cut mode again. And I'm going to cut a triangle here and go around here. And I'm going to cut a new loop here. And basically the reason why, and I know because like some of you are working on custom models or changing, doing your own thing. Basically when you cut, we're just adding in sections for more detail. Remember that you can work on a simple model and then add more detail, and that's what using the cut tool and stuff is for. So you should never really panic when the cut tool is being used. Just think of it as I'm just cutting into my sculpt so I know where to add detail. So I'm adding a triangle here. So the reason why I have these two edges here is so I can create a nice loop around my lips and create a nice little chin effect here for the base of my model. And all I needed was a couple of triangles that will be eventually turned with Turbo Smooth into a polygon as well. And it also makes it so that I can loop everything here a little bit more correctly. So what I did with this is I did my, like I said before, I did my cut tool, and I'm going to actually cut a couple more times here. I'm just trying to think here. Let's extrude a couple of these polygons first. And so if I build this up here, I notice that I have about 3 polygons I can use, right? So if you see these here, I'm going to get off cut mode for a second. I got a loop of 3 polygons that needs to loop with my lips. So I'm going to actually grab these right here. And I'm going to actually create polygons here. So I'm going to go polygon. I'm going to go create mode. Sorry about that. It takes some time to think sometimes about this stuff. So I'm going to go here. 2. So you see we're creating like a loop for our lips here, which is good because you want to create this kind of stuff to work with. It's much better than working from nothing. So our next step here is we're going to actually fill in these details. So I notice that we have a space enough for 1 empty polygon here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut in another triangle going down the cheek line here to the midpoint. So I go to my polygon, I go to my cut mode, and you see up here where this cheek is. So if you go from the triangle we created 2 polygons back, this edge right here, and I'm going to cut in a polygon here. So now we have these 2 squares. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to cut a new shape out of this. I actually will stop cutting right now. I see that I can actually create a couple polygons and use a triangle to make up for the shape I have. So what I'll do is I'll go here and I'll create a triangle. So remember 1, 2, 3, and 4 for a triangle. You click once, twice, 3 times, and then at the 4th time on the last vertex you click to create this triangle here. So with this triangle created, I'm going to create a polygon here. And to do that, I'm going to need to weld these 2 vertexes together here. So I weld these 2 vertexes down here together. So my chin is now going to be welded here. So I'm going to weld this. Or you can collapse it, whichever works for you. And now I'm going to create a polygon here. And I'm going to create a polygon here. So hopefully your end result of all this work of just manipulating those polygons, changing things around, will hopefully end up with you having a nice type of shape here. And with Turbo Smooth on, hopefully that turned out pretty well. And it did actually turn out really well. You can see how soft it's looking around the shape of our mesh. We can tweak the mouth shape to look a little bit better. We still have lips to create and stuff like that, so you don't need to panic too much about that because chances are it'll work out just fine as we go with that. But I'm thinking so far that actually looks really, really good. If I turn off Turbo Smooth for now, and that's all done, we can go to actually adjust and make sure all this looks good. So remember, we created a new line of vertices here. We should adjust these as well. So adjust the side view of them. Pop these a little bit forward. Make sure these look good. So this looks all good. Make sure to adjust the chin. Remember that we just put new faces on the chin. So now we should adjust this chin to look better. You can see that looks way better. We can pop this part of our mesh in slightly. Remember that everyone kind of has a little push in here. So if I push those ones in and push these ones slightly outwards, you can see the nice edge that's going to push in there. If I put Turbo Smooth on, hopefully we see it a little bit better too. Whoops, let me go that. You can see it pushes in slightly. And we can really refine that by just, grabbing these edges here and pushing them in a little bit closer as well. So I push these in and you can start seeing that little cleft, the little push in there on the chin. We're not going to push that too much because we got a rather soft person. We can always enhance that with a texture right afterwards. But you can see this entire face is looking pretty good. And that's exactly what we want to make sure how it's looking. So our next step is actually creating, let's say, one more loop. And then we're going to bring the nose down. So we probably want around about 3 polygons going down. And to do that, I'm actually going to cut a new edge here. Because we only have room enough for 2 polygons, but there's 3 polygons coming down here. The easiest fix is, because there's no polygons here, we can just cut a new loop here. So I go to Edit Swift Loop. And now we have a new loop to play around with. And we can even add more detail using that right afterwards, right? So now I want to create my nose. I go to Polygon, I go to Create. 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember, 5th click is on the last vertex you clicked. Like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we get a very pushed in nose right now. And if we were to smooth group this, it would just be like a really cartoony looking death nose, right? But we don't want that. We want an actual nose that looks like an actual nose, right? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create an n-gon with this, and we'll adjust it right afterwards to make sure that looks correct. So we're going to go to edge. Sorry, we'll go to polygon mode, sorry. And we're going to cut a nose shape in. Now we're just going to cut it right across here. So we're not worrying about, because remember, you should always have a triangle or a square. But right now we're actually just going to push these edges out to form the actual nose itself. Because this will be actually the outer nose, like the actual outer nose part. We'll adjust any vertexes that are floating afterwards. This would be considered either a floating vertex or an n-gon shape, and n-gons aren't really good to have when you finalize your models, but it's something we can tweak out as we go. So currently you see I have the actual nose that I'm able to pop out now that goes down here. So I'm going to do my adjustments here and rotate it just to make sure that my nose looks like the actual nose that I want, right? So this is where our adjustments come in to make sure that everything looks okay. And so take your time, adjust this nose. Don't forget that Mesh Smooth will also smoothen out your nose slightly. So basically what I'm doing is just adjusting this. And you see if I go to Turbo Smooth, you can see it actually smoothed out my nose quite well. And if I render, you can actually see that nose actually came out pretty darn good. So it doesn't really matter if we had an n-gon here, right? You saw that we had an n-gon here. This is considered my low poly model, and it's not even going to be the model I'm going to finalize. It's not the model I'm going to use. The finalized model that I'm actually going to use to model my high detail work later on, or when it's going to be placed in a video game, is actually going to be this n-gon. Or in a movie, it's going to be this shape right here. And it gets rid of our n-gon shape and actually created a nice loop for us to work with. So now I want you to take your time and adjust the nose, adjust the width of the nose how you want. For me, I want my character's nose slightly bit wider. So something like that. And that looks really good. So this nose is looking really good. Yep, that looks really good. I kind of like that a lot. So make sure that your cheek looks good. I even have that nice little cheek pop out here. You can see that nice cheek flush look here. It actually looks like the bone of a cheek, right? And this actually looks like a chin is popping out. So the further adjustments that you want to make to this mesh are entirely up to you. So the next step that I'm going to do here, actually for me, what I consider important is to detail that nose out a bit. I'm going to want to do another cut. But this time I'm actually going to cut along the lines that I actually have in the model. So I'm going to go to Edit Polygon Cut. And so where we just cut the nose before, you see we cut up here. This is where the N-gon is. Underneath where my actual nose is, I'm going to cut a new line where the nostrils would go, right? So I just cut across there. So you see I have this shape now. And then afterwards, I'm going to cut from the side of the nose, right up here, all the way down to the bottom nostril here. So I'm going to cut 1, 2, 3, 4. So the reason why I cut that shape in there is because I'm actually going to pop it out a bit to give it an actual nose shape. So a lot of people tend to go with the anime noses, like they don't have the details on the side of the nose. But for this one, I'm actually going to pop it out, and so we can get the actual detail in our nose visible. So you can see our character actually has nostrils that will form. So when I go to Turbo Smooth and turn Turbo Smooth on here, we actually get a nice nostril-y look to our character. Now there's still adjustments we need to make, and we can make those while we check out our Turbo Smooth here. I can see them, and I can start pushing these vertexes downwards, like this. So you can see it's starting to look like actually a lot more like a nose. And I can pop these in a bit, pop those out, push these down. So it's just a matter of adjustment. Like all I'm doing here is just adjusting the nose to get to a point where I like it. So I like the look of this nose. This nose looks small. It looks cute. And you can always just, like I said, go in. We could turn off wireframe mode right now, and I can see like pretty much how exactly my nose is going to look in the high poly. So I do want it kind of more pointed, so I will push this out slightly. I want this more outwards. So it definitely looks cute. I like this look. So this is good for me. So I'm actually going to move on to my next step now. So away from my nose, we're going to move on to getting, a little bit more detail out. I mean, we can cut in. Actually, you know what? Maybe we'll cut in the nose one more time. So we built the nostril out here. We have this nostril down here that we cut. I'm going to turn off my Turbo Smooth for a second. I'm going to push this out slightly. So the nose is going to be a little bit more outed slightly like this. And I know that Mesh Smooth, Turbo Smooth will take over for a little bit of it. But now that I have this, triangle shape here, maybe I want to cut in a little bit more detail so I have a little bit more control over the shape I have. Remember that Mesh Smooth, the closer vertexes are together, the more likely it'll keep its shape. So if I just cut, like, let's say one more polygon loop in here, so I'm actually going to loop from this vertex here. It's going to create a little bit of a triangle here in the low poly, but don't worry, because remember, we're using our Turbo Smooth version as our final. I'm going to cut in here. So that means it's going to refine this shape around the nose a little bit tighter. And I'm actually going to do the same around the entire outer edge of the model here and loop around underneath the nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut around here, here, and cut across here. Actually, what I may do is cut up there, like that. I'll right click to get out of that mode. So now my nose has a lot more detail built into it. So if I go to Turbo Smooth, you can see my nose is a lot more refined and getting that kind of detail to the sides. And now if I go into it, play around a little bit more, I have a lot more control over the shape of my nose, and I can do a lot more alterations to make sure my nose looks like exactly how I want to look like in any of these views, really. So now I just go to, F3, F4, alter it like that. And I can make it look softer on any sides I want. I can soften out the nose here by pulling these vertexes across here. And that looks good. To me, that looks good in the front and side view. I may want to push this vertex here slightly back to give it a more rounded look. But other than that, I'm pretty content with the shape. I'm going to undo it a couple times. There you go. That looks good. So remember, like I said, cut in the more places that you want more detail, and you're good to go. And we can also cut nostril shapes out of it too, which is our final step. Basically, I have my nostril shape already in here, so I just need to push this up slightly. So these are more closer towards the edges. And what we should do to get a more rounded nostril is make a couple of cuts into our nostril. So if I go here, I can literally just extrude this inwards and get a little nostril. So if this works for you, then great. Basically, if I render it right now, you can see we got little nostrils. So it's trying to round it off as best as possible. And you can tweak that by just adjusting the vertexes and stuff. All I did was extrude inward once on the polygons. And you can see they're just basically squares here. If you want to make sure they're more rounded, you can always cut in the sides to add more detail. But for me, just one time extruded inwards, and everything else kind of looks fine just the way it is. And then adding the Turbo Smooth made it nice and rounded. So that was cool to me. And then I would call my nose complete. So the next step, basically what I'm going to do is the mouth. And the mouth is a little bit, I wouldn't call it simple. It's a little bit complicated, but also simple at the same time, because all we need to do is extrude the edges of the mouth inwards a few times. So basically what we want to do is add a couple of extrusion layers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So basically all I did was I grabbed all the edges around the mouth, and I'm going to extrude them by using the scale tool. So extrude scale tool just a little bit. Oh, I missed one. There you go. Like that. Just ever so slightly, ever so slightly. And I make sure they match in the middle. And for the first set, I push it out. And I just scale it a bit. I'm going to turn off my Turbo Smooth right now, just so I can see what I'm doing a little bit easier. And you can see if I go to my left view or my right view, you can see that these are now the lips that we pushed out. So there's a lot of adjustment that needs to be done first. So I'm going to actually adjust these lips. Like that. So I'm just doing my adjustments. I'm pushing in the side of the lips here, just making sure these lips go outwards. But I'm just making sure that they're pushed out just one level outwards. And then I do that one more time again. So with all the edges of the outer edges selected here, see, make sure you got all these selected. I'm just going to scale one more time. Scale extrude. I'm going to scale outwards. And I'm going to scale together. And then I'm going to scale extrude again. So with this, like that, you see I got basic set of lips that is open. Like that. Now it's up to you to modify these to make sense. We want to close our mouth. We're not going to model any teeth or anything like that this time. But we're going to adjust these to make sure that it makes sense for what we're modeling. So remember, water flowing, these lips will flow downwards like this, flow downwards like this. I make sure everything kind of makes sense. So I grab all this. So I got these lips. So I want them to puff out a bit. So I adjust these vertexes so they go like that. And then I can push this vertex back in a little bit more. And I adjust these. So you can push these ones a little bit more back to create the curve. So for instance, this might be a little too far forward. So since this is my first initial step of the lips, I might want to keep them more like this. And the lips do puff out quite fast, so let's say that's okay for this. I need to adjust these ones though. And bottom of the lips should be there. And this could be up here. And this will be the center of the lips here that pushes out. And you can see in my side view now, they definitely look a lot more like lips. And we have to adjust them, of course, even in our front view, because lips don't pucker that much either. So I push F3 on my keyboard a little bit, and I make sure that the edges of the lips are indeed closer to the edges. And I make sure that these kind of scale inwards at a roughly smaller pace. So I'm puffing out the lips here. All I'm doing is making sure these puff out. So I'm making sure they puff out, puff out. So you can see we're getting a much better, more realistic shape of lip. Those look like lips, right? A lot of people fail at lips like really hard. So this, I know this is going to be hard, but take practice doing this, because if you can do lips, you're one step ahead of all the competition. And trust me, a lot of people tend to skip this step, but if you get a nice pair of good lips, like it makes a model look realistic. And basically, with lips, if you can get them done and done nice and correct, it looks real and makes your model look great, and it's a good base to work from for doing anything in 3D. So just make sure to take your time and focus on them. All right, so lips are done. That's up to you to do your modifications to make sure they match up to your original lips. So please do so. One step that a lot of people tend to do that usually work on lips is they like to separate the smoothing groups of lips. So what they do is they grab, for instance, you see those are my lips, and I change them from smoothing group 1 to smoothing group 2. So that way, if I render this out, you see they look like they're a separate part of the model a little bit. So that's just a handy way of making sure they look like they're still a little bit smooth, but they're separated from your initial mesh to look good. So just adjust those lips how you see fit, and then we're going to move on to the final part to get your ear in for the head mesh. And then we're going to start. This is more than enough to get you guys doing a couple days of work, but I'll also give you a short hair tutorial soon, so we can get you started on hair, and then we'll go for the next steps from there. But you see what I'm doing? I'm even as I'm talking to you, I'm still adjusting my model to look better. So don't be afraid, and don't be scared to do a little bit more, right? To really make this stuff pop out like crazy. You're not hurting yourself by doing a little bit of extra work. So please just do the extra work, and you'll find that you'll get a great model. You see my cheeks are a little poked in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to adjust these by popping out the cheeks slightly. So this is where it comes down to you to get that little bit of extra work done. And don't forget that Mesh Smooth will also take over. Turbo Smooth will also take over. And you can see with Turbo Smooth on, we've got really nice lips, really nice face going on. And after some more adjustments and stuff like that, it'll look way better. Oh, we're on orthographic mode. No wonder why I look kind of weird. There we go. So we're going to adjust that as we go. So next step is we're going to do some slight modifying of the eyes, and then we'll take a look at the ears. So I'll do one more tutorial for this for you guys to have. So you have Monday and Tuesday. You've got a lot of head modeling to do if you're going to focus on the head model. So just get at this, and I'm going to provide one more video tutorial after this to get done with the rest of the head, and then it's go to town for that, and then we'll provide more during the week. Okay, so one more video coming up. Be sure to take a look at it.